I listened to Christian metal for the first time a few days ago. I heard about it from this group that I was in, that there's Christian metal. I didn't think that like praise music could come in that form, that genre. They didn't really seem like they went hand in hand. I checked it out. Very interesting. I liked some of it. Some of it was really good. I mean, growing up, I would listen to metal here and there, and I really enjoyed it. And if you know your music, you're well versed. I think you would agree with me that some of the most talented voices and musicians, guitarists, drummers, they're all, or a lot of them are in metal, heavy metal. So it's quite an art, and a lot of talent is in that genre. And I think a lot of that actually came out in some of the Christian metal that I listened to. It's quite interesting listening to that. But the strange thing about it is, if you've listened to metal, you've listened to some songs that don't exactly seem like they're singing. like like some of these songs, they claim they were praising Jesus, but I didn't understand any of them. Like 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 one of them, I thought, I don't know, they were screaming, and then there was like pig squealing and pig grunts, and sounded like demons, and I don't know. I was like, what's going on here? like like what are these demon pigs doing in this? Like, are they even praising Jesus? I don't know. I didn't think like praising Jesus would be like, like, it doesn't make a lot of sense. Yeah, I guess what Mark meant to say when he was writing down his gospel, as instead of Jesus casting the demon legion into all those pigs, well, he did that, but instead of them going running off the cliff and into the water and drowning, I think what what Jesus did was he sent them through a time portal, and they landed in a recording studio and just started singing songs. I still don't know if they're about Jesus. I really don't. I couldn't understand them. Anyways, wow. I feel like the first part of the show is just me telling you about stuff going on in my life, just because no one else will listen to me. That's not true. All right. Anyways, welcome to this podcast. First of all, I want to say thank you so much to everyone who listened to my first one. I got a lot of great feedback. I think if I look at the YouTube and Spotify listens right now, I'm at about 150, a little over 150 views slash listens. So very thankful for that. Got a lot of really good feedback. I want to thank everyone who listened and thank everyone who shared it. I think this podcast could be a really good platform for everyone to kind of come together and just think about this world, and think about living in this world as young people, as young adults, and some even younger in our generation, and then also older people coming to listen to what this generation has to say. I know it's a big burden. Well, not necessarily a big burden, but I don't know. That's my view for the podcast, and hope that you'll continue to join me. The real test will be those of you who continue listening to like the 5th and 6th episode. It was all exciting in the beginning, but who's going to stick around, huh? Do you have the stomach for it? Do you? You got the guts to stick around? I hope so. It'll be fun. It'll be good. Okay, let me get a sip of water as I always have to. Okay, cool topic today. You see the title, Has American Christianity Always Been Like This? So I'll give you some background. Last semester I was taking an American history class, and I was reading this book written in the 18th century. And this author, his name is, if you want to look him up, J. Hector St. John de Crèvecoeur. Wow, imagine saying that name at graduation. Holy moly. He's French. Wasn't American, but he came over to the colonies, and he wrote this sort of fictional book about what it's like being an American farmer. So the character in this book is someone who grew up in America, or they were born and raised in the British colonies. He himself was not, but it's slightly fictional. Even though it's written from a fictional perspective, it still offers a lot of truth as to what was going on in the colonies at that time, a lot of what was going on with culture, a lot of what was going on with religion, and sort of also he has really good comments about the differences between the colonies and how Europe was like. Very big differences. Very cool stuff. Excuse me. I would recommend you looking that up. It's J. Hector St. John de Crèvecoeur. Yeah, don't even try spelling that last name. I don't know. Just look up Letters from an American Farmer. You'll find it. It's good. For all my history buffs out there, I think you'll enjoy it. So I was reading this, and I was kind of stunned when I came about 75 pages in on this passage where he talks about religion in the colonies. And I was stunned because there's something that he says in there that rings true even to today, with respect to Christianity in America today. And I was so fascinated with that. Wow, how is there this truth, this thing that he's observing? How is it that there's remnants of it today, that it's still happening today? What is it about? Is there something about America that makes this trend persist over the centuries? I don't know. Well, actually, I don't know, but I want to speculate for you. That's what I'm here for. That's what I want to kind of try to answer. Has American Christianity always been like this? So I want to start. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to read you. It's kind of a long passage, so bear with me. But I want to read you what he says about religion, especially on, this is from his third letter, I believe. Okay. So he starts off with this kind of hypothetical. And just go along with it. Hypotheticals are good good uses for proving points. But, all right. So he starts off. He says, how am I looking? All right, good. Let us suppose you and I to be traveling. We observe that in this house to the right lives a Catholic who prays to God as he has been taught and believes in transubstantiation. He works and raises wheat. He has a large family of children, all hale and robust. His belief, his prayers offend nobody. About 1 mile farther, on the same road, his next neighbor may be a good, honest, plodding German Lutheran, who addresses himself to the same God, the God of all, agreeably to the modes he has been educated in, and believes in consubstantiation. By so doing, he scandalizes nobody. He also works in his fields, embellishes the earth, clears swamps, etc. He has the world to do, or what has the world to do with his Lutheran principles? He persecutes nobody, and nobody persecutes him. He visits his neighbors, and his neighbors visit him. Next to him lives a seceder, the most enthusiastic of all sectaries. He likewise raises good crops. His house is handsomely painted. His orchard is one of the fairest in the neighborhood. How does it concern the welfare of the country or of the province at large what this man's religious sentiments are, or really whether he has any at all? He is a good farmer. He is a sober, peaceable, good citizen. This is the visible character. The invisible one is only guessed at, and is nobody's business. Next, again, lives a Low Dutchman. He conceives no other idea of a clergyman than that of a hired man. If he does his work well, he will pay him the stipulated sum. If not, he will dismiss him and do without his sermons and let his church be shut up for years. You will find his house and farm to be the neatest in all the country, and you will judge by his wagon and fat horses that he thinks more of the affairs of this world than of those of the next. He is sober and laborious, therefore he is all he ought to be as to the affairs of this life. As for those of the next, he must trust to the great Creator. I'll stop there. Okay, what are we seeing? So he's talking about all these different types of people who come to the American colonies. Now, if you're well versed in what you may call pre-American history, I guess, you'll know that a lot of people first started coming out for religious reasons. Keeping in mind that the Protestant Reformation was not long before the English started coming to America. And so a lot of different denominations, a lot of different sects of Christianity, they started coming out to America because they were being persecuted, as is kind of commonly known. But not too long later, just kind of everyone started coming, which I'm not saying that's a good or bad thing. Just bear with me here. So, a lot of people start coming, and the colonies were very alluring. A lot of freedom from the government, freedom from religion, freedom of religion, I should say. There was also a lot of opportunity. In this class that I was going in, when we were studying this time period, we were talking a lot about how this land, it was so amazing. In fact, people were glorifying the fact that this land was so fertile and so ready to be farmed, and there was so much of it, and you could go out and you could set your land out and you could have what you wanted, and you could really own the fruits of your labor. You could exercise your freedom. I think that's a good thing. I think that's pretty cool. But that was definitely the alluring part of the colonies coming to, I should say. Now, we know that a lot of the religious groups, well, I shouldn't say we know, but a lot of the religious groups that came for religious reasons did thrive. Think of the Puritans, especially look in the 17th century. There was the Great Puritan Migration. I don't know if you have heard of that, but they thrived. And not to say, the way I say thrived is I mean they thrived religiously. They thrived as a community. There were definitely a lot of hardships. Very dangerous, very harsh weather conditions. Some very interesting relationship with the natives. But later on, when Trevor is writing in the 18th century, people coming, they didn't, I guess their religious motives for coming were not as huge as they were the century previous. People were coming mainly for the opportunity, for the freedom. And they were no longer bound by any sort of religious tradition. In Europe, at the time, it was very religious. The church it had a huge presence in Europe. But they come to America, and especially with the Protestant Reformation, they don't have any tradition that they're really tied to. And so we get this picture that Trevor paints for us of these people living very far away from each other, and they all have a lot of material wealth. They're all very concerned with the way their house looks. They're very concerned with the fruits of their labor. Talking about, you'll judge by his wagon and his horse, what kind of man this is. So coming to America, they were allured by that very worldly perspective, not so much religious. And I'll delve into that later. I will continue on. So he says, each of these people instruct their children as well as they can, but these instructions are feeble compared to those which are given to the youth of the poorest class in Europe. A very perceptible indifference, even in the first generation, will become apparent. Now, like I was saying, these people come, and they're very their Christian faith is kind of put at the back burner. Not to say they were atheists or secular, but that is, their motives for being in this country were non-religious. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm not saying that's a bad thing at all. In fact, I'm kind of glad they came over for those reasons, because I actually happen to like America, so I'm glad that it started off. But this is not exactly the point of the show. What I'm trying to point out is the fact that there were these worldly temptations that these people faced coming to America that I think we can connect to today. So he's talking about these mixes of different denominations, these different people. So they start off feeding into the temptations of the world, material prosperity, wealth, comfort, and they begin with that temptation, and then they have their faith, their Christianity in the back burner, kind of the back of their head. And then they so much so that they intermarry among different denominations. Not necessarily saying that's a bad thing, that's a different discussion. However, you put that all together, and you get exactly what Trevor says. He says, a very perceptible indifference, even in the first generation, will become apparent. He then continues, the children of these zealous parents will not be able to tell what their religious principles are, and their grandchildren will still less. And their grandchildren still less. Man, that's interesting, right? That, at least I hope that it's interesting to you, that when we feed into these temptations of the world, that the subsequent generations are affected by them. Some food for thought. I continue, or I should say Trevor continues. He finishes, thus all sects are mixed, as well as all nations. Thus religious indifference is imperceptibly disseminated from one end of the continent to the other, which is at present one of the strongest characteristics of the Americans. Remember, he's a Frenchman. These motives have ceased here. Zeal in Europe is confined. Here it evaporates in the great distance it has to travel. There it is a grain of powder enclosed. Here it burns away in the open air and consumes without effect. Very interesting stuff, I think. So, I find it interesting how he notices that. I think that's really good social commentary. He notices, kind of as an outsider looking in, that you can't have it both ways. I think it's a testament to what Jesus said. You can't serve two masters. People came to the colonies. They had to choose, what is going to be more important to you as you move to these colonies? Not that it's wrong to move to these colonies, but what's going to be more important to you? Your faith or the life you have right now? This very short life. I want to mention one more time, interesting quote. I'll say it one more time. Therefore, he has all he ought to be as to the affairs of this life. As for those of the next, he must trust to the great Creator. Yeah. So, I think we can relate to the religious climate of the 18th century, being 21st century Americans. As Americans, the freedoms and the opportunity afforded to us is definitely very tempting. I think they're good things. They are. I don't think they're inherently bad, but it's what we do with them. Like the writing alluded to when it said, therefore, he is all he ought to be as to the affairs of this life. When we have freedom, opportunity, we can relate, right? I know I can. We feel the need to only be concerned with the matters of this life. Now, we look to those around us and are tempted to live the life of material prosperity. In America, we're so very materialistic, and I want you to think, especially right now, if you're a Christian, think about what it means to have the good life as an American. Totally devoid of God. What would a very secular American, what would their good life be? Well, I'd imagine it's have a really big house, preferably on a hill. That'd be nice. Big view, have some nice cars, maybe have a great job with some good status, have a cool family, and that's it. I think a lot of it is wanting to feel safe. When these people came over to America, when these colonists were here, I think what drove them was safety. I mean, they left because they didn't feel safe. They didn't feel safe either in their economic status or in their social status. So they wanted to come and try and secure more safety. They come to America, they come to the colonies, and they establish their safety with working every day concerning the ways of this world. So, I ask the question, is this temptation inherently American? I don't think it is. I think a lot of people grow up, I know a lot of people grow up in very different circumstances. Think of someone who grows up in a war-torn country with the black market around them, a lot of violence, and give them their faith, but then also give them that upbringing. I think they'll always be tempted to live their life with a gun in their hands to feel safe. And then thinking that living that life with their gun in their hands, feeling that like they're in control in this very chaotic world, somehow that makes them safer. We know how that ends up. It's a dark life, often very short life. Think of someone who also lives in a very poor country. Someone where food is certainly not guaranteed, in fact, maybe even scarce. I don't know how many of them do this, but I'm sure the temptation is always there to steal, to lie, and cheat in order to get by, in order to survive. And I don't think we're much different, Now, thankfully, I'm very grateful for this, the fact that we have a lot of freedom. America as a whole is very prosperous. We have a lot of wealth where you're probably not going to go hungry. And even if you aren't at a high economic status, there's a lot of different ways in which you still probably won't get hungry. And also, overall, we're pretty safe. I mean, there's different places in America that are not, but overwhelmingly, we're pretty safe from danger and from crime compared to those of other countries, But I still think we want to feel safe. But you're saying, Trevor, what does that mean to feel safe? Obviously, I don't mean safe with crime and with danger. I mean safe in our image. Think of the picture that Trevor was painting in this passage about every person was concerned with the way that their house looked, the way that their crops looked, the way that their wagon was, the horse they had. I think we want to feel safe in our image, frankly. I think there's a lot of that going on, feeling safe in our image. And how do we do that? How do we want to feel safe in our image? We want to be in control. What does that mean? That God is not control. Either God is in control or God is not. And because we want to feel safe, and it's hard to relinquish that trust to God because we feel like we're not safe when we're not in control, we start asking questions like, how do I look to the world? And do I look like how I imagine the good life in America, devoid of God? We can really let that question dictate our lives. And God sort of becomes how it was described in this book. It's very lukewarm faith. It's very, we don't trust him. He sort of just becomes something we carry around in our pocket, like like God becomes like a little thing we hold in our pocket, like chapstick. I carry around the stick of chapstick every day. If you know me, you know that I always have to have chapstick on me. And I carry this in my pocket every day. When I take it out, I use it. But when I don't use it, when I don't need it, it stays in my pocket. And I actually don't think about it at all. And I don't feel it, even in my pocket anymore. It just escapes my mind. But when I need it, it's there. I think God sort of becomes that way with us. And I think talking about image, we're very concerned with our image to the world. We want to feel safe in our image. That's more American than the other countries. I think that's inherently American, not necessarily with other countries, although I'm sure it exists elsewhere. We get so caught up in how we look online that we literally begin to serve our image online. And we start to think, what am I doing? What am I doing on this day? Is this going to be a good Instagram pic? Oh man, I can't wait till I post on Snapchat with this location filter and tell people where I'm at. I do it. I do it. I mean, it's kind of fun, right? And sometimes it's cool, right? You see your friends, it's like, oh wow, they're in such and such place, and that's nice. But when we're doing it, I feel like we're not doing it for exactly the right reasons. Like, oh hey, I want to show my friends where I'm at. It's more like, hey, look where I'm at. You get me? I don't know. Maybe if you're just listening, you can't see my facial expressions to try to emphasize that. But, like those people who came to North America. Sure, they had God in mind. They came from a very religious place. But they fed those temptations that the world showed them. Freedom, opportunity, prosperity, comfort. And they did that so much so to the point where God becomes like chapstick. And I don't think we're very different. Now, a sort of technical term for this is lordship. How much is Jesus Lord of your life? That, if I'm being completely honest with you, lordship is probably the hardest part for me. It's very tough. And I think I struggle with that more than anything else. I don't want to sit here. This whole time it might have sounded like, oh, Trevor, why are you giving me this holier than thou speech? Why are you trying to tell me what to do? I'm just trying to point something out that all of us can learn from and can try to act on. I've learned, though, with lordship that, especially with struggling with lordship, it's actually probably a good thing to struggle with lordship. Because, think about it. If you're struggling, that means there's these two parts of you, or of yourself, the sinful side and the side that Jesus is in. And you're struggling because you know which side is right, you know which side is true, and you know which side you ought to be on, but the other side is really pulling you. That creates struggle. So your intentions are good. And God loves us, so he'll help us out in our struggles. Something that I've come to know is that when I don't struggle, that's when red flags need to be raised. That's when I know I'm in trouble. If I'm just not even thinking about vices that I slip into, and even doing good things, so I heard the term today, sin of omission. I'd rather not do something good today, whereas I was in a position to do something good and I didn't do it. I just don't even think about it. It seems like my moral compass has gone out the window. That's when I know I'm in trouble. And when I have a brief moment of clarity when I'm in those times, when I'm in those periods, I know I'm in the most in trouble when I'm not struggling with lordship. So I guess all of this is to say, you know, don't don't be too worried if lordship is hard. It's very hard for me. I struggle with it day in and day out. And as Christians, we know that the life God offers us is much better. It's much better than this world has to offer. If you're not a Christian and you don't understand that, ask me. I'd love to explain how. I'd love to explain why the Christian life is better than this worldly life. But I'm assuming that you know that this life that God offers us is much better, but the temptations of the world, we want to feel safe, and to feel safe, we want to feel in control, so we don't want to give up that control. So I encourage you, it'd be unreasonable for me to say, don't struggle with it. Make Jesus Lord of your life. No, what I'm saying is struggle with God, be honest with him, and he'll get you through it. Okay. That took much longer than I thought it would. So, sorry, I really like history and I like diving into it and analyzing it, especially when it relates to today. All right. Get to current events now. Let's see. I'll take a big stretch. What current events are going on? Let's see. Trump impeachment's going on. I really don't care about that. Yeah, I just don't. Let's go. Okay. So, as many of you, I want to talk a little bit about Kobe Bryant's passing. As many of you heard, I'm sure this is not news to any of you, that Kobe Bryant passed away on Sunday. I don't want to sit here and tell you about like his legacy in basketball. I'm not much of a basketball person myself. I just kind of want to talk about what his death means. Now, I mean, I was a little impacted by that. I'm not into basketball now, but when I was younger in elementary school, so late aughts into early 2000 teens, I was into basketball, and I'm from SoCal, and the Lakers, they were my team. So and it was a great time to watch too. I mean, you had like Derek Fisher, Lamar Odom, Pau Gasol. Of course, I'm forgetting other ones, but of course, Kobe Bryant. He was the leader, and he was just phenomenal to watch. I remember watching him, and he was a heroic figure to me, as he was to many of you. And even if you're not into basketball, I'm sure you recognize how great he was and what he meant for sports. And he was just such a terrific guy. But man, how sad is it, that seeing a celebrity that we don't expect to die from maybe like drug overdose or violence or something, or also a celebrity who's like really old, someone who's still in their prime of life, not necessarily career, but someone to pass away so tragically, so accidentally too. I mean, man, how sad is that? Something I want to comment on, maybe that you haven't heard yet, is the idea of the thoughts and prayers. A lot of what I see on social media is people posting, "Oh, my thoughts and my prayers are with the family. They're with those who are affected by it." I have two things to say about that. First, the people who criticize that, and the people who are like, "Your prayers mean nothing." Like, people who have no respect for the prayers. But those are the same people who say, "My thoughts are with the family." I hope this doesn't sound insensitive, but what does that mean? Like, in what way does that affect the family, especially the family of famous people? How do thoughts affect the family? So why would you criticize people for saying my prayers are with the family? Because people who are at least praying for the family, at least, like, you may not even believe in God, you may not even be a Christian, but at least we believe that what we are doing has a legitimate effect on the family. So I think that critique of prayers is totally unreasonable, especially if you're the type of person who's just a thoughts only person. I'm not saying that's unloving. I'm not saying that's, bad or anything, but I'm just saying you got to watch yourself. If you're the anti-prayer person but always post about my thoughts are with the family, think about that. Another thing I'm going to say, and this is something that is going to be challenging to a lot of you. Definitely doesn't taste very well coming out of my mouth, but I see a lot of people posting thoughts and prayers, and I think it's great. It's good that people are doing that, but I think a lot of people run the risk of doing it just for attention. Like, hey, look at me. Look how virtuous I'm being. Of course, we never really know who are the people who are genuinely posting that stuff and who are the people who are just kind of posting it to post it. I would hope that you would reflect on that to see what kind of person you are. If you are the type of person who does that, reflect on that. But something else that I want to speak from before I was a Christian, because I would see so many people do the thoughts and prayers thing. I felt a little bit more cynical and negatively towards it at the time, but something that always just, it irked me was when people are like, my prayers are with the family. Now that's fine, but what I had a problem with was when these people are like, my prayers are with the family. So think for a second. I'm not a Christian, so I say, okay, this person believes in God. This person, we're in America, so probably a Christian. Okay, so they just put that target on themselves. Not necessarily a target, but they just painted that on themselves. So what does that make me think as a non-believer? Maybe you can guess where I'm going with this. I now hold you to a higher standard as a non-believer. That's how I behaved. I don't think that's right. Now that I've become a Christian, I understand it. We could get into that another time if you want. But I'm like, okay, you're supposed to be a Christian. You're offering your prayers. That's fine. One, do you actually pray? Something to think about. Two, do you actually pray, or are you just doing it for attention? Think about that. And two, now I know who these people, right? We're on social media. Usually we know we're not famous. We usually know the people we follow. So when we see that, and then we see the way that these people behave in life, now everyone is sinful, I admit, but it's like, come on, gotta do a little bit better. They're you'll see these people who are just behaving the last thing you think of is a Christian when you see them in this world, but then they're the first ones to say, my prayers are with the family. Like I said, you may misconstrue this. This may be confusing to you, but I'm just trying to say, saying your thoughts and prayers is not a bad thing, so long as the intentions are right. And I'm not saying you shouldn't do that. All I'm saying is, and I'm also not saying that you have to be a saint walking around. We know that the church is not a museum of saints. It's a hospital for sinners. Okay? I'm not saying you have to be a saint. But I'm just saying, if you're going to say my thoughts and prayers are with the family or with whoever is affected by a tragedy, know that you are painting on your back a target. You are saying, hey, everyone, I'm a Christian, usually in America. Hey, everyone, I'm a Christian. So the people who are not Christians, they are now going to judge you by a higher standard. Rightfully so. But that being said, we are called to live differently than this world. We are called to live outside of it, behave outside of it, behave in ways that the world just doesn't really get, but with love in the center of it. So, I hope you did not misconstrue what I'm saying there, okay? I'm not against any of the thoughts and prayers, okay? All right. Be interested to see if that gets controversial at all. Okay. All right, we'll go to Q&A. Wow. All right, I'm at 40 minutes. Okay, I'm already at 40 minutes. If you're cool with it, it's going to be a little longer. These questions are really good, so I hope you stay. Keep listening. All right, keep listening. They're good questions. So this is from Mario, buddy of mine back home. He asked this question: what do you think people's regret is when they are about to pass away? Is it not living to their happiness? Is it that they didn't pursue happiness and when they had, they let it go? Do people seem to be more religious as they feel like they are going to pass away? Yeah, wow, great question, especially on the topic of death. What do I think people's biggest regrets are when they're about to pass away? Yeah. I like that second question. Is it not living to their happiness? Is it, and then the next one, is it that they didn't pursue happiness and when they had, they let it go? So, Mario, I think this is a great question. I think when it comes to regrets, when we are about to kick the bucket, obviously I have little authority on that, being the young buck that I am. No, I think I don't think anybody lives away from their happiness. I think everyone, however they best understand what happiness is, I think they try to live to it as best as they can. So I don't think that's a regret. I don't think I think it's reasonable to say that when people are on their deathbeds, they're not saying, "Oh, I didn't try to be as happy as I could." I think what they're saying is, what I thought was going to give me the most happiness actually didn't. And I think also when they're on their deathbed, there's sort of the experience of life and the moral clarity allows them to see like, hey, maybe what I thought was happy, what was making me happy at the time, didn't actually make me happy. So I don't think their biggest regret is that they didn't pursue happiness. I think their biggest regret is that they pursued the wrong thing. And what makes it even worse is that at the time, they didn't know it. They didn't know it was the wrong thing. Okay. I want to keep time in my mind, but I'll just say this real quickly. You may ask yourself, well, Trevor, what is a true happiness? I will tell you this in sum. What Jesus said, 2 commandments: love God with all your heart, mind, and soul. Love your neighbor as yourself. That is the true source of happiness. I can fully attest to that. My life before Christ and after Christ. I hope is a testament to everyone around that is true. I know it's certainly true. So, next question from Zach, another buddy of mine back home. He has two. He said, "Hey man, great podcast. The Spirit is really moving in you, and I have a few questions, talking points that maybe could move you towards an episode or just simple replies." First of all, thank you, Zach. Really appreciate that. 1. When discussing about Genesis and the 6-day time frame that God created the earth in, there is another factor, which is that God actually resides outside of time. So we can't really calculate 6 days with 1 day equaling 24 hours like you said. 2 Peter 3:8 gives the explanation that 1 day for us is like 1,000 years to God, and 1,000 years to us can be 1 day to Him. We as humans only have a concept of time firmly grasped, but we cannot grasp eternity because we have not been exposed to it. It is like putting a blind man within the largest mansion ever and telling him to get out when he doesn't have the blueprint or any idea what the layout is. Solid analogy. Unless someone specifically tells him where to go, he will spend his whole life searching for the exit and never find it. Talk about follow God. Yeah, amen. Zach, I don't know. So in my last podcast, I talked about, how old is the earth? I gave two sides of arguments, and I kind of came out on the side of, I am more on the side that the earth is much, much older than a mere 6,000 years, as young earth creationists would say. Zach, I think I'm actually not sure if you're agreeing or disagreeing with me. I think you're agreeing with me that it's older than a mere 6,000 years. I mean, I certainly agree with everything you had to say. I mean, yeah, God is outside of time, so we can't literally say that there's 6 days. It's more representational rather than literal, as I talked about, representational versus literal in the last one. Yeah, great comments. I agree with it. Really good analogy. Solid. His second one, both of our generations are so consumed with technology and the satisfaction that it provides, and it hinders the church defined as a body of believers and for ministry to others, both private and public. How much more would God move if instead of isolating ourselves from the church, we isolated ourselves from unnecessary electronic distractions and idols? Would we actually be more attuned to the Spirit and be able to communicate with the homeless man screaming for no reason? That's an analogy I mentioned in the last podcast, if you don't get that. All things are possible through God, and there is no situation or person he cannot heal right. It could open up more to the students. It could open up more to the students who are in the mindset of, well, I don't mind if you do your thing, because they will see that Christians are different. Our lives are the best example of what we have experienced through Christ. Amen. Amen. Yeah, I totally agree with you. So I think what Zach is talking about is in this last podcast, I got a question about should we live stream church services? If you want to see my answer, go listen to that last podcast. But yeah, I mean, how much more would God move if we actually came together and put out the unnecessary electronic distractions and idols as I speak into this microphone and look into the camera on my computer? But no, I agree. I think really great points. I think something that's very important what he said was about because they will see that Christians are different and they'll be more open to us if we are more engaged with them and not so engaged in our own technology. Yeah, I mean, I've personally experienced, because growing up, I don't know, I didn't have a really good experience with Christians. I'll be honest with you. And I'm sure some of you that I grew up with who were Christians while we were growing up are listening. I'm not saying it's necessarily you. Okay. That being said, I came up here to Berkeley, and I came to this church that I am now in. And while a lot of what made me decide to follow Christ was intellectual, a lot of it also was actually recognizing that I am sinful. But a very critical part of my salvation was the fact that I met a group of believers who were very loving. I mean, the guy that I would sit down with every week to talk about this stuff, he would drive 30 minutes from home and where he was at during the day. He would come and we would talk, and he would talk until I was satisfied. And me being the type of person I am, as you can tell how long this podcast is going for, I wanted to talk for like 2 or 3 hours, and he did. And I would go to Bible studies, and these people fed me. I didn't ask them to, and wait for it, they didn't ask me to pay them back. And I was struck by that. It was very loving, and people going out of their way for like the little things, going out of their way to meet up with me one-on-one. I remember someone who was he may not know it, but he was a bigger part in my salvation journey than he might think. He went out of his way to study with me in the library and to go play tennis with me, and also just like taking the time to invest and like actually know how I'm doing. Showing love. I talked about that in the last podcast. Another plug, go listen to it. But John 13:30. Oh my. Please don't rebuke me. It's John 13. Just give me a second. All right. It's like 38, I think. Nope, that's not it. 34. A new commandment I give to you, that you love one another just as I have loved you. You are also to love one another. By this, all people will know that you are my disciples if you have love for one another. John 13, 34, 35. Sorry, I did not come up with that faster. Please do not rebuke me. So true. So true. The love that we have for one another and the love that we have for other people, it's supposed to look different than what the world gives. Very true. Okay. I would end it here, but I have one more question, and it's really, really good. So stick with me. Okay. From Michael, another buddy back home. Hey, people here in Berkeley, people at my church, step your game up, okay? I want to hear from you. Michael asks, some theologians say all Christians should evangelize. Others say it requires a gift. Paul and Peter both say we should all evangelize when posed with questions about our faith. Paul in Colossians 4, 5 through 6. Oh, sorry, that was in parentheses. That's where he got it from. And Peter echoes this sentiment in 1 Peter 3:15 through 16. He asks, Michael, do you believe we should all actively, capital A, evangelize? And if so, how does one evangelize in an America who seems to be turning its face from religion? Wow, great questions. Do you believe we should all actively evangelize? Okay, yes. It's not that simple. Don't worry, that's not just my answer. Okay. Here, why don't I read you a good passage from 1 Corinthians 12. Please don't rebuke me. About that. 1 Corinthians 12:14. For the body does not consist of one member, but of many. Paul continues, sorry. If the foot should say, because I am not a hand, I do not belong to the body, that would not make it any less a part of the body. And if the ear should say, because I am not an eye, I do not belong to the body, that would not make it any less part of the body. If the whole body were an eye, where would be the sense of hearing? If the whole body were an ear, where would be the sense of smell? But as it is, God arranged the members in the body, each one of them as he chose. If all were a single member, where would the body be? As it is, there are many parts, yet one body. That's 1 Corinthians 12:14 through 20, in case you're curious. So, what is Paul saying there? There's a lot of differences in us. I think, when we think of evangelization, we think of, okay, I'm going to go out into a crowd, and I'm going to go talk to people, and I'm going to share Jesus with them. Not that that's wrong. It's not very popular. Not all of us can do that. I'll tell you that right now. Frankly, I think it's kind of unreasonable to expect people to be like that. There's so many different ways of evangelization. I just talked about them in the last one, about the guy who helped me in my salvation decision. Showing love to people. I mean, evangelization means, hey, dude, let's go get some food, man. I'll pay for it. More, you know what? You're kind of in need right now. I would usually be like, oh, I'm busy, but go do something for them, for whoever that may be. That's all evangelization. I heard a great quote from a pastor. He said, we are often the only Bible that people will ever read. I think he got that from 2 Corinthians 3, 1 through 3. My church should know those verses. They'll know what I'm talking about. But, it's not just going out and telling people, hey, there's Jesus, believe in him, he died for your sins and whatnot. That's part of it, but you got to play to your strengths. We're different members of the body. God created us so uniquely, and I think it'd be unreasonable to expect the same thing out of everyone. Some examples. I think of one of my peers in my ministry group. He has a phenomenal ability to just reach out to people, and a lot of that it comes with a lot of courage. and he has a lot of courage. He's very bold, and it's just, comparatively speaking to someone like me, it's like no problem for him to just go start talking to different random people. And I wish I could be like that, because man, that's so cool. But for me, I'm kind of antisocial, and I don't know, I don't really like talking to people. I'd rather people not bother me. God did make me with that temperament. I, can't deny that. So I think it's unreasonable for me to try to behave in the same way that he does. Plus, he does it better than I do. So, I mean, he should do what works best for extending the kingdom of God, right? Or it works best for him. So, also, I think of shout out to one of my staff in my small group. She, God bless her soul, such a well-spirited person following Christ, great leader. But she's leaving our group, sadly, but not so sadly, because she's starting a new ministry initiative to reach out to people who share very similar life experiences to her. And there is a large group of people that she's targeting that she could best deal with. I could not, because I did not experience a lot of what she has expertise in and a lot of what these people are going through. She can't relate to them, or I can't relate to them as well as she can. And so, yeah, she feels that her spiritual gifts, her means of evangelization are much better in that way than they are currently. I think that's great. I think it's fantastic. Man, how encouraging she is to me, and I hope to all of you, that she's willing to take this initiative, and all for the glory of God. Man, I think that's fantastic. So you may ask, Trevor, what's your way of evangelization? Despite me being very antisocial. Well, I am the type of person who I won't talk to you at all unless I know you, and the more I know you, the more I will talk to you. I think that's a really good plug for this podcast, because I'm not necessarily talking to anybody right now, so I can talk for an hour, no problem. Yeah, so, I like to invest in the relationships before I reach out. I wish I was a little bit more bold and courageous like my friend is, but I don't think I have the same temperament or personality type to do that best. So actually, one of the big reasons why I started this podcast was to try to offer what I feel like God has blessed me to his kingdom. I want this podcast to be a way that I can reach out to people who need to grow spiritually. And it's also a way to help me grow spiritually, believe it or not. It really is. And then also, I hope that this can be a podcast for people who are around our age, who are a little confused about Christianity. They don't know much about it. Maybe they're curious. They could come on and they could ask really good questions. I could answer them as best as I can. Not saying they're going to be great answers, but that these answers and these questions can be a blessing, because even if a skeptic comes in and asks a legitimate question, you're going to be blessed by that question, because it's going to make you think a little bit differently about your faith, which is a good thing, So yeah, that's how I try to. That's how I view my means of evangelization. To, really play to your strength. I think you should really pray to God. If you don't know what your spiritual gifts are, pray to God and ask. Help him show you what your spiritual gifts are. He wants you to know, because when you know, you can better use them for his kingdom. I'm the type of person who really likes history, philosophy, theology, apologetics, and so I want to offer my love for these subjects to this podcast as a means of blessing other people, because it is a corner of Christianity that I think a lot of people should visit, and I think should visit frequently. So, let me put my book back on my book stack for the aesthetic, right? Oh, by the way, I'm sorry for this wall behind me. It's like I realize that my face blends in with the paint. Like you probably wouldn't know that my face is here unless if it wasn't for my face being three-dimensional. Like when they were painting this wall, were they like, "Hey, what color should we paint this wall?" And then the guy was like, "Hey, have you ever heard of the color white person?" Like, man, what is that? If I stand too close to the wall, people may not see me. What's going on with that? Anyways, okay. I think I've went on long enough. Michael, I hope I answered your question. He asked, and if so, how does one evangelize in an America who seems to be turning its face from religion? Yeah, I mean, not to beat a dead horse, but, showing love. You don't have to come out rebuking people. You don't have to tell people, hey, you're going to hell. Please don't do that, actually. Show them love. Show them love. John 13, 34, 35. Okay? All right, everyone. If you made it this far, thank you so much. It was such a blast. I hope you enjoyed it. Share it with people. Share it with your friends, believers, non-believers, all the same. Share it with your family. Share it with your goldfish. Yeah, share it with everyone. Share it with your dog. Say, hey, Cujo. Hey, come listen to this podcast. I don't know why the dog's name is Cujo. Anyways, that's just what popped in my brain. I've talked too long, and it's getting awkward, so I'm going to cut it. Okay. I'll see you guys in the next one. Take it easy.